Kevin. Kevin. Elena raised her voice a bit as she called out to Kevin. Kevin, who was engrossed in his training, stopped when he noticed Elena standing near the door. It had been 10 hours since Elena had left Kevin. When she returned, she messaged him, but she didn't get any response. She kept messaging him, but after receiving no responses, she decided to check the training hall where they sometimes practiced. Kevin had added both Elena and Eva's names to the ID bracelet system, allowing them to enter with him. Because of this, Elena entered easily and saw Kevin swinging his spear. His focused eyes didn't seem to notice her. Initially, Elena thought Kevin was deeply engrossed in his training and was almost about to leave. However, she noticed that Kevin was making small mistakes in his movements and didn't seem to correct them. From a young age, Elena had been taught about weapon users. Being a mage, she needed to understand the fundamentals of each weapon before she could form a counter against them. Elena paused, realizing that Kevin's training appeared more like him venting his frustration. Is it my fault? Elena wondered. For the first time, Elena deeply regretted opposing Asher during the party. Seeing Kevin in the state made her believe she was the reason for Kevin's strong feelings against Asher. She tried to speak, but felt as if she were becoming more of a burden to Kevin than a pillar of support. This situation brought back memories of when she first met Kevin. She was young then, and her father, James, had wanted to introduce her to a particular boy. The first time she met Kevin, he soon became her best friend. "Hello, I am Kevin Whiteheart," said a younger Kevin, extending his hand. Back then, Elena hadn't interacted much with children her age, being the sole daughter of the head of the Rothschild family. Her status made it difficult for anyone to approach her carelessly, and her family made sure she was always in a protective environment. She initially felt shy meeting a boy her age, but quickly warmed up to Kevin, who put her at ease. Over the years, Elena found herself spending more and more time with Kevin. Initially, James Rothschild introduced Kevin merely as a family friend. However, upon recognizing Kevin's impressive progress and innate talent, he never deterred Elena from spending time with him. James believed it was beneficial for his daughter to maintain a close relationship with someone as promising as Kevin. Furthermore, James surmised that Kevin's abilities were unparalleled in their generation. After all, no one else had achieved what Kevin had during his first awakening. As memories of their carefree childhood days together resurfaced, Elena was consumed by guilt, thinking the current predicament was her fault. Mustering her courage, she tried to get Kevin's attention, but he didn't hear her initially. She persisted, and Kevin, upon hearing her raised voice, looked up in surprise to find Elena in the room, noticing her downcast expression. Setting his spear aside, Kevin walked over to Elena with a concerned frown. Contemporary romance. "What happened?" Kevin inquired, his voice tinged with worry. Seeing Kevin's genuine concern for her, Elena felt a mix of happiness and sadness. "Nothing. Just, what were you doing?" she asked, setting her concerns aside for the moment. She realized she had to be Kevin's anchor, not his anchor's weight. That," Kevin replied, a bit sheepishly, aware he'd been taking out his frustration. Typically, Kevin wouldn't waste any training time, but today, he needed to vent. "I am sorry," Elena whispered, lowering her gaze. "What?" Kevin responded, taken aback by her words. "It's because of me that you are pushing yourself so hard," Elena admitted, not meeting Kevin's eyes. "Hey," Kevin exclaimed, taking hold of Elena's shoulders, causing her to look up. Their faces were mere inches apart, making Elena's cheeks flush. "It's not your fault," Kevin reassured her. "And don't fret. Minor setbacks like this won't faze me," he added confidently. Seeing Elena so concerned for him rekindled Kevin's dwindling resolve. Without even realizing it, she had helped him find his way again. "Did you find Kevin?" a female voice inquired as the door opened. Eva entered, her face reddening upon seeing Elena and Kevin so close together. Unsure of how to react, she hastily exited the room. Wait, Elena called out, realizing that Eva might have misinterpreted the situation. Kevin seemed to share her concern. Sorry, I didn't mean to. Kevin began, but his voice trailed off in embarrassment. We should explain things to her, Elena asserted. Kevin nodded in agreement, and they left the room together, seeking out Eva to clarify the misunderstanding. In the ranker's dorm, on the third highest floor, Alyssa was practicing her mana and meditating to strengthen her connection with mana as she got closer to reaching D+ rank. Her speed was a bit faster than Ash's during his previous life. But unlike ordinary people, Alyssa's fingers kept trembling as whenever she would close her eyes, specific memories would appear in front of her. The memories that she didn't want to see, but they were the reason that Alyssa kept pushing herself her whole life despite having a body that was incapable of living long. Alyssa opened her eyes as she looked at her hand, which was still trembling, and anger and hatred rose inside her. She hated that she was still scared and weak to the illusions of her mind. She had lived throughout her life experiencing worse memories and constant headaches that would make any sane person insane. Nobody would have thought such a young girl could hold on that long and keep going on for a purpose, which she knew she wouldn't be able to do. I have a chance now, Alyssa clenched her fist. I will get my chance, Alyssa kept reassuring herself. Every day Alyssa didn't forget to remind herself why she was going through all this. She didn't wanted to forget her only purpose in her life. She was waiting for her chance, and the time was coming when her powers would be revealed. It would be during the year-end examination, and she had no choice but to fight to maintain a position in the top 5. She aspired to enter the trials ground, which was reserved only for the top 5 rankers after the final rankings of the year-end examination. The year-end examination was an event where many, including members of the High Council, attended to observe their own children or potential students they might recruit later. She was aware that she would attract much attention because of her background, and even her father and his family would be present. But they wouldn't be there for her, they'd be there for her half-brother, Alan Astaria. Alyssa wasn't sad that Alexander had abandoned her. It had been a long time since she considered anyone in the Astaria household as family. She understood the challenge before her, to secure a spot in the top 5 without revealing her full strength, though that wouldn't be easy. She was also aware that the other rankers were formidable opponents. Unlike Asher, who had years of experience, Alyssa was just a young girl. Most of her experience came from observing others or from the occasional practice sessions she attended in dual class. But what Alyssa didn't know was that the faculty members, who had strongly opposed her becoming the year representative, were now too preoccupied with implementing the orders left behind by Farnes to give her any thought. Isn't it too sudden? One of the professors asked his colleague. What can we do? It depends on the principal's decision after all, he replied. But still, I didn't think it would come this soon, the first professor said. Come on, everyone knew this was bound to happen someday, the other responded. Given the state of the world outside, I can understand why the principal made such a decision, he added. Only a handful of professors were privy to this information because Farnes had bound each of them with a mana oath not to reveal anything about it until his return. The changes Farnes made were known only to a select few, all of whom were bound by their mana oaths not to disclose the details until Farnes returned. Even Asher was in the dark, unless someone dared to break their mana oath and risk being expelled from the World Academy. Currently unaware of this information, Asher was sparring with Damien and Amelia. Initially, he had wanted to decline, but he agreed to Damien's request after some persuasion. However, the outcome was predictable. Damien and Amelia had just reached rank D and were no match for Asher at his current level. The purpose of the spar wasn't victory, but rather self-improvement. In just a few months, the end-year examination would take place, an event the entire world watched closely. It was an occasion where the prides of elite families clashed with one another. It's enough for today, Asher said, stopping to look at Damien and Amelia who lay on the floor after the spa. He really doesn't hold back at all, Damien muttered, feeling pain throughout his body. Even Amelia felt sympathy for Damien since he spent half the time getting injured while trying to protect her from Asher's blows. Using his shield for support, Damien slowly got to his feet and gave Asher a weary look. I heard they're allowing you guys to visit the Sanctuary of Mages next month. Damien asked both Amelia and Asher. That's what I was told, Amelia replied. Asher's thoughts drifted. The Sanctuary of Mages was a place he'd never visited in his previous life. He didn't need any weapon other than his current sword, so this visit was the only reward that would benefit him. Before going to the Sanctuary of Mages, Asher had a lot of things he needed to do. What was happening inside World Academy didn't concern Asher, as none of the students, even those in the 4th year, posed a threat to him. The only people Asher would have to go all out against were Jaden Hargrave and some of the other 4th year rankers like Reese Williams. He wasn't going to use time dilation in front of everyone. It was an ability he would employ only when facing an adversary far too powerful for him. Just as with Louis Roth's shield, Asher had used time dilation solely to escape from him. Even the current Asher would struggle against a peak S rank hunter, even if he used time dilation. At that time, although Asher was only at peak D rank, he had caught Louis off guard and left him in a state of confusion. Sigh. My reward was delayed, so I can't even get a weapon for myself, Damien muttered. Dexter Wright was not only preoccupied with tending to his own needs, but with many SSS rank equipments damaged, his hands were full. This meant that only those who chose the Sanctuary of Mages could visit it for now. Asher removed his safety braces that restricted his mana to D rank. Although his physical capabilities were of AC rank hunter, his mana output was limited to the peak of D rank. Asher glanced back, seeing Damien and Amelia in conversation, discussing their errors. Without a word, Asher departed and returned to his room. Upon arrival, Asher entered the living room where he activated the hologram on his ID bracelet. Several news articles and rumors, posted by various individuals, began to appear. Asher scrolled through them, wanting to see if his artifact's usage had garnered any significant attention. He stumbled upon one particular anonymous article that hadn't received much notice, and it was about Louis Rothschild. "The troublemaker of the Rothschilds is at it again," was the title of the article, and it wasn't surprising to see such articles about Louis. However, this time, no one, not even Louis himself, could have imagined that his actions were being influenced. Due to his status and James's interference, Louis Rothschild's name had never been associated with any major scandals, but his public image left much to be desired. Inside the Rothschild manor, James gazed at Louis, who sat across the room, eyes fixed on the floor. "Do you realize the magnitude of problems your actions could have caused if they were exposed?" James exclaimed. Louis remained silent, listening. Contemporary romance. Ra ND Alpha SN Omicron V Epsilon L, C Omicron M, answer me. James demanded, his mana flaring up. Ads by Pub Future. He mocked me, Louis finally responded. Mocked. James echoed incredulously. I know everything, Louis. He was merely discussing the matter concerning Zephyr, James clarified. Louis felt humiliated, his fist clenching in frustration. Yet, he didn't act against James. From a young age, James had asserted his dominance over Louis, ensuring that the latter always knew his place. This was why Louis never dared to challenge James and his authority. After all, James was an SS rank hunter, while Louis was only a peak S rank hunter. The power gap between them was evident, especially since James had access to the family's assets, including the artifact bequeathed by Dalton himself. Reflect on your actions, James advised, trying to rein in his temper. I don't want to hear of any further incidents from you. And don't you dare bring further shame upon me, James warned, his words cutting deep into Louis. So he still blames me, Louis mused, swallowing his rising anger. Just like James said, the hunter whom Louis had beaten severely had been discussing the night the vault was breached. His tone had led Louis to believe he was being ridiculed. After facing James's reprimand, which included serving in the guild until further notice, Louis exited the room. However, his role was not as a team leader, but merely as a regular member. Due to James's order, Louis had lost his position within the guild and now he had to work his way up until his punishment period was over. Only because he is older, thoughts like this started popping inside James's head. All this is happening because of that bastard, Louis thought as he walked the empty hallway. I think you should take a look at. He remembered the gaze, and he still suspected it belonged to Asher Greville, but he had no proof. One day, I will prove it myself, Louis muttered as his eyes went cold. It wasn't possible right now, but he knew one day he will meet the heir of the Greville family. Far from Rothschild Estate, inside the Williams family's mansion, a fairly middle-aged man was looking at the reports he was given when a particular ring on his hand started shining. He frowned as he knew what this private communication line was used, and it had been years since he had used it. He touched the ring and three faces appeared in front of him, and he was familiar with them. What happened? He asked. We called this meeting to discuss an important issue. One person spoke up and rest of them including James went silent. After all, this man was comparable to Dalton Rothschild himself. It was Osbert Tervian. It seems Vincent Williams is not as busy as I heard, another man spoke. And he was none other than the Neville family head. Why don't we stop for a second? Alistair had interrupted. I have a question that is bothering me for a while, he said. Did you see the report and the person, Irwin, whose dead body they found there? Alistair family's head spoke as Osbert silently listened. His words made Neville raise his eyebrow, as he wanted to know the answer. For the past few days, the seed of doubts had been growing inside his mind, and he got alerted when this question was asked. I did, and it seems he was captured, Osbert replied with authoritative tone. His words made the other three a bit uncomfortable, but with him saying it like this, Neville had no other way but to accept his words. You don't need to worry about that at all, Osbert added. What about the product? Vincent asked while maintaining his calm face. The only reason he was present in this meeting was because of the partnership deal that Williams and Tervian had agreed upon. And the product they were going to release and the project that Osbert was working on more than a few decades. Jackson will deal with it, Osbert said. And I only called this meeting because of this new problem, Zephyr, Osbert said. Somebody in the High Council has to be involved with them, the Alistair family's head said. And it can be one of us as well, the Neville head said, but everyone went silent. Yes, one of them could be related with Zephyr, and it was a possibility that all of them were aware of. Are we here to point fingers at each other? Vincent asked. And where the hell such a person came from out of nowhere? Vincent asked another question. You are the only person here that would do such a thing, Alistair had said with an annoyed look on his face. After all, it didn't took you long to switch your colors a decade ago, he scoffed. Enough. Osbert stopped their conversation. The reason he called this meeting was to make sure that the recent incident hadn't made any of them back down on him. If he sensed even a hint of betrayal from one of them, he was ready to take actions. And it wasn't if all of them didn't knew that Osbert was trying to see who was still with him on the idea they've worked on for decades. The product will come out next year, and I believe everyone will do their part, Osbert said. Seeing that there was no disagreement, Osbert came to the next thing that he called this meeting for. Zephyr and what to do with them. Having someone like Zephyr was a good cover for them to do certain things, but their existence was equally dangerous for them. His actions thus far seemed like he wanted to damage the High Council. The Neville head spoke first. One by one, they all keep giving their opinion and at the same time judging each other in their conversation. In a distant space, disconnected from the worlds where everything seemed frozen, nothing moved. Stillness prevailed. The only existence there, a being resembling a woman, was compelled to open her eyes. A greenish energy surged within her, an energy so powerful that it could be one of the most strongest forces, if not the strongest. It struggled against chains that bound her. The being opened her eyes, and the stillness faded, revealing her deep black eyes with green pupils. The price has been paid, she declared, noticing how the chains resisted her power. It will revert itself, she murmured, closing her eyes once more. A pulse of green energy emanated from her, causing the chains to disintegrate into dust and vanish from existence. However, these chains, whatever their nature, didn't react aggressively like they had to the purple energy that had appeared earlier. Balance had to be maintained, and anything altered needed to return to its original state. At the Neville estate, the head of the Neville family reflected on a recent meeting. It was the first time he had witnessed their plans go awry. It wasn't just a few years of planning that had been thwarted, it was decades of preparation. He was acutely aware of the machinations behind their actions. Not everyone was privy to their covert alliance. The Neville family had always kept its distance from other elite families, except for those in Belveria. Tap, tap. His fingers tapped the table incessantly, the thought of betrayal ever present in his mind. Let's wait for a bit. I shouldn't rush this, he murmured to himself. He had instructed Gavin to maintain his friendship with Leonard, Osbert's son, and he still had other cards to play. But he didn't know that his very own son was operating under the influence of another, working against Leonard Tervian. The end-year tournament was drawing near, as was the gathering of the High Council. Let's step away for now, he decided, allowing his distrust to grow within him. Osbert didn't possess the influence akin to that of the elite families, who enjoyed significantly more freedom than the World Association. This compelled him to rely on others, and his choices were the Nevilles and the Allisters. The head of the Allister family struck a deal with Osbert. Even the head of the Neville family wasn't privy to the details, but he could surmise the nature of the agreement. The Neville family was presented with what they currently lacked the most: power. Ads by Pub Future. They had influence and resources, but they were in dire need of power. None of the three elite families in Belveria, Martel, Hargrave, and Neville, were allied with one another. Hargrave boasted Xerax, the SSS rank hunter, while Martel had ties with the Artisans Association. This positioned him in a spot where Osbert's offer seemed particularly appealing. The amount of power he had accumulated until now appeared to justify the alliance. However, he was also aware that despite their towering achievements, their foundations were fragile. Just as it had happened a decade ago, it could all crumble in an instant. Foundations built on betrayal were destined to collapse. I guess after that plan failed, this was bound to happen, he muttered. It had been a year since their grand plan faltered at the first step. Far from the Greville estate. Allow me to clean this up, Hassan said, glancing at Nathan. Nathan looked to his side and nodded. Lying around them were the dead bodies of hunters, ranging from S rank to a few SS rank. Nathan wasn't bothered by the blood on his greatsword. He was accustomed to it. Yet, a frown marred his face. He recognized that those who had come were targeting the twins, especially since he had sensed the presence of an unknown S-rank hunter near his estate. What puzzled him was that none of these attackers tried to retreat, even though they were clearly outmatched and bound for death. Fear was evident in their eyes, yet they resisted. It was a bizarre sight, something Nathan hadn't encountered in his entire life. Their movements were fearless, but he could feel that they were terrified to fight him. All met their demise swiftly, having self-destructing artificial artifacts placed near their hearts. Initially, Nathan intended to keep them alive, evident from how swiftly he disarmed them by severing their limbs upon confronting them. Nathan's personality around his family and others often made people forget how cold-blooded he was. Hassan, who had spent years beside Nathan, knew about this. He knew how terrifying the person he served could be. But he didn't know that the rune of Airden also made Nathan so much more numb to such humane emotions. Nathan departed, leaving the grisly scene for Hassan to manage. Upon arriving at the Abyss Guild's headquarters, Nathan made his way directly to his personal chamber, a space tailored for his stay and training. He was careful not to train too close to the estate, wary that his mana might inadvertently endanger the twins. I might miss their tournament, Nathan mused, recalling the upcoming end-year tournament a few months away. If he chose to utilize the SSS rank mana gem, regardless of the outcome, his return would take months. During that absence, he wanted the twins to be at the World Academy. Although he had reservations about Fanas, he recognized that the World Academy was the twins' safest haven when he wasn't around. Due to his mana oaths, Fanas was bound to protect every student from any external threat. However, if the threat came from within, such as from the students themselves, the twins would receive no assistance from him. That brat can handle it anyway, Nathan remarked. He trusted Asher to safeguard the twins within the World Academy. Having witnessed Asher's prowess firsthand, Nathan altered his original plans. Had Asher not displayed his exceptional talent to the world, Nathan wouldn't have intended to bid for the mana gem in such a way, making himself a target for every SSS rank hunter. Yet understanding the potential outcomes in 3 years' time, when Asher would graduate from the World Academy, Nathan realized he had to ready himself for future challenges. This decision solidified the moment he observed Asher successfully inherit his ancient rune. That brat has me doing so much extra work, Nathan lamented. With a talent surpassing even that of Ivar, Nathan was aware that those who had been passive for years would soon become active. 2 months passed in tranquility. There were no updates about Zephyr or any other disturbances. Initially, even the World Association suspected that several factions might emerge after the inflammatory declaration from the masked man. Oddly, everything returned to its usual state, almost as if Zephyr had never existed. However, this didn't mean that people became complacent. Even the authorities remained vigilant. Zephyr was slapped with the highest criminal charge, and a decree was issued stating that anyone affiliated with Zephyr would be arrested on sight. Some speculated that, following his failure, Zephyr had gone into hiding to escape the World Association's fierce retaliation. I told you, these people are mere troublemakers who vanished when pursued, a young man remarked to an older gentleman. Concentrate on your tasks, Edward advised, glancing at the novice mage apprenticing under him, contemporary romance. Several other mages were also training under Edward Amaris, an elder of the Mage Association. Forget them. You should be working on your research paper, a female mage reminded the young man. Don't worry, I'll surpass yours this time, he replied confidently, but she merely shook her head in response. Edward paid no heed to their banter, engrossed in crucial preparations. A delegation from the World Academy was due to visit, and Silvus had instructed Edward to guide them to the Sanctuary of Mages. Upon receiving details of the visiting students, Edward was taken aback by the first name. He's a mage, Edward murmured, noting Ash's name. His bewilderment was so profound that he overlooked the last name on the list of 3, Alyssa Astaria. The Sanctuary of Mages wasn't a place even Edward could access freely. It was significant that Silvus permitted someone outside the Mage Association to visit without any contribution to the Mage Association. While some elders voiced their opposition, they were quickly silenced upon learning the visitation was requested by Fanas Calmot, a name with enough clout to quell any dissent. As far as Edward could recall, every video of Asher Greville that was circulating, and all the rumors about him, praised his sword art. So he didn't understand why a swordsman would seize this opportunity to visit the sanctuary of mages. Remember, you will have one day to study there, and you can take out up to 5 copies of any books you find, Elsa said, looking at the 3 students before her. When the announcement was made that Asher, Amelia, and Alyssa would be visiting the sanctuary of mages, many students, and even some professors, felt envious. The sanctuary of mages wasn't a place anyone could simply visit. Even elite families couldn't attempt to enter, unless they were prepared to wage war against the entire mage association. Only by making significant contributions to the mage association and by participating in annual meetings for many years was someone granted the privilege to enter the sanctuary of mages. Even Elena and Eva were envious about missing this opportunity, but they refrained from speaking up due to the recent incident with Kevin. Elsa reiterated the rules and etiquette primarily for Alyssa's benefit, as she believed that Asher and Amelia would likely face little difficulty during their visit. Both of their statuses ensured that even the elders of the Mage Association treated them with respect. However, this wasn't the case for Alyssa. Given that it involved the Mage Association, Elsa took extra precautions to brief Alyssa on several matters. Except for Amelia, both of them wore the black uniform, symbolizing their position on the student council. Now, follow me, Elsa instructed, turning to enter the teleportation gate. Ordinarily, a 3-star professor wouldn't be assigned to guide them, but Xander insisted that Elsa escort them to the Mage Association. This was not just to manage affairs at the Mage Association but also to ensure the safety of the trio. Aside from Elsa, only a few assistants were present, as there was no need for additional security. The teleportation gate directly linked to the flying island, where the Mage Association was located. Amelia and Alyssa stepped through first, followed by Asher. Upon arriving, they were greeted by a fleet of cars and a security team ready to escort them. Elsa quickly surveyed the surroundings before entering a car, gesturing for the others to follow suit. Throughout the journey, all 3 students remained silent. Amelia felt particularly out of place, sandwiched between 2 individuals who were not conversationalists. Why is he browsing these articles? Amelia wondered, sneaking a peek at Asher's phone. Both of them are so peculiar, she mused, mentally contrasting Asher and Damien. She recalled how Damien would often share articles he found intriguing. It didn't strike her as unusual that Asher had a similar habit. However, she couldn't discern the type of articles he was reading. Unlike Damien, Asher was observing the effects of his plans unfold. The cars came to a halt, and the security personnel opened the doors. Everyone exited the vehicles and followed Elsa through another entrance. This special entryway was designed to lead them directly to the floor right beneath the topmost one, where Silvus resided. As they proceeded, an elderly man approached to greet Elsa, prompting her to pause. 2 individuals were with him. The deep crimson hue of their eyes immediately revealed their identities. Even without the telltale sign, the old man was already acquainted with 2 of the students. Sir Edward Amaris, a pleasure to see you, Elsa greeted, extending her hand to Edward. Edward returned the gesture with a smile. His gaze drifted to another girl, who donned a metallic mask and was seated in a wheelchair. Recognizing the name Astaria, it took a moment, but he remembered who this girl truly was. Likewise, Edward responded with a light chuckle. Let's converse as we proceed, and I'll brief you on the Sanctuary of Mages, Edward suggested, leading the way to an elevator. Consider that place a compendium of knowledge from every mage who has served the Mage Association since its inception, Edward summarized. Research and the practice of magic were commonplace within the Mage Association. So, when a mage innovated a new spell or made a groundbreaking discovery, this knowledge was documented and archived in the Sanctuary of Mages, credited to their name. From the chairman or the various elders that were part of the Mage Association to the current one. Each one of them had their research and knowledge stored there. It was a record of all the mages that had ever worked in Mage Association. Although you will see countless records, but I would advise you to think about a thing you want to excel at, Edward said. Because the amount of information in that place is too much for even me, despite the amount of times I have entered there. Edward said. Despite being an elder, Edward could only enter the Sanctuary of Mages 2 times each year. Arriving in the lift, Edward started speaking about the rule inside that needed to be followed. Don't tamper with any of the recorded books or research papers as they are all protected under multiple spells, Edward said. There will be a few places that are not to be accessed as only elders, and some are so secretive that only the chairman could visit there, he said. Although the sanctuary was vast, they wouldn't stay for too long. It was better to tell them to look for things they really wanted to know about, as the information present in the Sanctuary of Mages was priceless. It was a library that contained the record of magic that had developed over hundreds of years. And many people knew the worth of the knowledge that was stored there. Contemporary romance. Even some people from the elite family often tried to contribute in the Mage Association with their own research papers to just have the access to visit that place just once. The lift opened as they arrived at floor that was covered with runes all around it, and in front of them was a huge gate that had golden and black engravings. Welcome to the entrance of the Sanctuary of Mages, Edward said as he pointed at the huge door. Amelia was looking at the gate with surprised gaze as she could feel the amount of mana coming out of there. Some people even call this a paradise for a mage, Edward said with a smile as they walked near the gate. Edward took out a badge and it started floating near the gate, and after rune inspection process the gate started moving and an opening was formed. Well, as you know, you guys have only a day, so make the most out of your time, Edward said, but he didn't tell them one last thing. Although all people could try and enter the Sanctuary of Mages, there was a special spell that was placed on the entrance itself which would take the person to place of their strongest element. The sanctuary was in an entirely different place on the flying island, and its location was only known to the chairman of the Mage Association and those that will take that position it in the future. Elsa stayed behind as she saw the three of them enter one by one. You didn't tell them about the path that they will enter different locations, not the ones they wanted, Elsa said as she looked at Edward, who was smiling. It's the same for all the others who enter it for the first time. It was the same for you as well, Edward said as Elsa remembered the first time she entered this place. With that said, I hope they can find what they were looking for, but I have a question, Edward said looking at Elsa. Why is the grandson of the sword god here? Edward asked. Don't ask me, but that boy wants to learn magic, Elsa replied. Edward frowned and Elsa could understand the reaction. Edward was a teacher himself and he thought that their response to Ash's decision was not good, as he was meant to become aura user, not a mage. But he could guess that World Academy wouldn't intrude on the student's decision as well. Although there was one thing he didn't know, and it was the fact that Asher was also the strongest even in the mage class, despite not using even an ounce of his swordsmanship. Only Alyssa was the one in the whole class that stood a chance against Asher in a pure mage fight. And at that moment, some other elders entered that place as well, and Elsa could guess what they wanted just by looking at their faces. How the hell could you allow that Garcia's girl to enter this place? One of the elders shouted, and Edward let out a sigh. It will be a long day, Edward thought. As Asher stepped through the gate, he felt the presence of the space element around him. However, the spell was too complex for even him to fathom. After all, this wasn't a spell crafted by a solitary mage. Employing runes, artifacts, and many mages with an affinity for the space element, the founding members of the Mage Association had constructed this sanctuary. Welcome to the sanctuary, an elderly man's voice greeted Asher as he entered a courtyard-like space. Just by setting foot there, Asher sensed the rich concentration of mana enveloping him. There was a reason why the Sanctuary of Mages was hailed as a paradise for mages. Step forward and enter the place where you'll find what you need, the aged voice instructed. By merely observing his surroundings, Asher surmised that it was a recorded message from one of the founders of the Mage Association. This was one of the places Asher had never been to in his past life, and he had no reason to visit it then. Only a mage would deem the effort required to gain entry here worthwhile. Asher moved ahead, observing multiple runes illuminating beneath his feet. He recognized a few, but there were also several potent runes unfamiliar to him. He pressed on, reaching a hallway that culminated in a solitary door. Unbeknownst to Asher, he had been transported to the place he needed, not necessarily what he sought. The design of the sanctuary ensured that during one's initial visit, only a designated section of the library would be accessible. As Asher approached the aged wooden door and swung it open, he was met with a vast collection of records and books. Each floated beneath texts displaying the names of the mages who had contributed to or authored them. Unlike the Great Library, this repository held records of the most brilliant minds, including all the previous chairmen of the Mage Association. However, as Asher surveyed the titles of the records, he realized that none of them pertained to any element other than space. Presently, space was Asher's most potent element, a strength he owed to the rune of Aearden residing within him. While Asher explored the space element section, Amelia and Alyssa were teleported to other sections distinct from the common area of the Sanctuary of Mages. At that moment, Alyssa stood in the advanced element section dedicated to ice magic, a very rare affinity possessed by only a few. Alyssa's eyes looked vacant as they moved from one record to another. The area contained spells, theories, and books penned by renowned figures from the World Association. Anyone deemed worthy of entering the Sanctuary of Mages was undoubtedly an exceptional mage. Hundreds of unique spells resided here. Though some might be deemed inefficient, their uniqueness warranted their place. Ads by Pub Future. Alyssa wasn't using her wheelchair. Upon entering, she had used gravity magic to levitate. However, recognizing that there was nobody to observe, she chose to walk normally. Contemporary romance. As she delved deeper into the Sanctuary of Mages, a commotion arose outside involving several elders who were visibly displeased. She won the competition and was part of the Rank 1 team, Elsa proclaimed, facing the elders. Many of them frowned, recognizing the woman before them. With her fiery orange hair and piercing black eyes, Elsa Robles was regarded as one of the few individuals globally with an unparalleled affinity for the fire element. As an SS rank hunter, her influence and status were formidable even beyond these walls. Regardless of her achievements, how could you permit such an individual to enter the sanctuary? An elder interjected. Edward was aware that the Garcia family's history cast a shadow over the Mage Association. Therefore, he had anticipated their reaction to Alyssa's presence. She has entered, and if you have any issues, you can speak with our principal, Elsa said, invoking Farnas's name, which made some of them hesitate. Are you favoring that girl because of your past? One of the elders inquired. Instead of a straightforward answer, they felt Elsa's mana intensify, and she gave them a cold stare. Have you forgotten that I represent the World Academy here? Elsa retorted as another elder exhibited his SS rank mana. However, it was evident that Elsa was more powerful than him. Enough, Edward intervened, his mana dominating and suppressing both of theirs. Edward had impressive control over mana, a skill that made Silvers keep him close. No one can question this decision. We agreed to award the privilege of entering the sanctuary to students from the World Academy, Edward stated. The identity of the student doesn't matter. We shouldn't concern ourselves with it, Edward continued, though the other elders remained unsatisfied. And if you cause such an uproar, what you fear might transpire, Edward warned. Given their aggressive reactions, rumors about Alyssa were likely to circulate, tarnishing their public image. Edward's words seemed effective as some elders began to lower their mana. And you, Professor Robles, remember that this is the Mage Association, Edward addressed Elsa. I apologize, I got carried away, Elsa replied, though her face betrayed no genuine regret. Edward understood Elsa's aggressive stance. After all, Alyssa's mother and Elsa had once been close friends, and it was a known fact among many people that knew about Elsa Robles and the Garcia family. If anyone else has concerns, we can address them in the next meeting with the chairman, Edward proposed. His statement made the elders finally relent, with one turning to depart. Why do I have to deal with this? Elsa thought as she took back her mana. She felt a headache was coming as she would need to clean any mess that would occur here. But the words that the elders said made her remember the past, especially her old friend. Inside the sanctuary, Asher was walking as he picked a book about Tier 2 and Tier 3 space magic spells. These were spells that were made by people that even died doing these research. Each of them were extremely valuable sources of information that couldn't even be bought with money. This information that had gathered here for hundreds of years as many crazy space element mages researched on it. It seems weak, Asher muttered as he looked at the first spell that was mentioned in the book. Due to the fact there were very less space element mages, and the amount of difficulty that came with learning it, there weren't many powerful spells stored here. Even Asher with his current understanding of space element could see the flaws in the spells, but all space element spells were somewhat flawed. Asher didn't know if it was because of Rune of Airden, or his own talent, but he could sense the flaws that was in the foundation of the very spells that he read till now. The only flawless application of space element that he had seen was from a non-mage hunter, and it was Nathan. Nathan's sword art that he created himself was revolved around his use of space element with the help of Rune of Airden. Maybe there is more to this rune than this, Asher said as he realized that Rune of Airden was not a simple. It was something he had expected. After all, he had seen the full potential of another ancient rune with his own eyes. As Asher made his way towards the next books, he could see all the books were quite thin. And all over the page, random things were written. These books seemed less about spells but more like a diary of a mad person. Various descriptions about the greatness of space element, and other such things, such as the claims about what they could possibly do by mastering this element. But all the books were short, similar to the lives of these mages. All the spells that Asher read make him see another aspect of space element that he had missed or never considered. Even if the spell itself was flawed, the theory behind it made Asher realize a few things that took many such mages years. Host's magic mastery is increasing. A system notification popped up as Asher kept reading the books calmly. Asher looked around as he placed the book back to the shelf, and he could see how many books were there even for an element like space. It just showed why Sanctuary of Mages was such a coveted place by all mages. How am I supposed to understand this? Amelia questioned as she looked at the book. Fortunately for her, augmentation magic, despite not being counted as a separate element, was a form of pure mana spell. To cast augmentation magic, your mana core needed to attract pure mana, which was then used to weave the augmentation spell. Just like affinity, if your mana core didn't have the affinity to attract pure mana on its own, you couldn't become an augmenter. The only reason augmentation magic wasn't considered an element was because of the principles behind it. But that didn't mean the ones who created the spells of the Sanctuary of Mages didn't factor in such possibilities. Although rare abilities like Eva's barrier magic, or even Kai's illusion magic that was part of his bloodline ability, wouldn't be detected by this spell, for Amelia it wasn't the case. Thus, she was fortunately transported to an area where a variety of books were placed, and all of them were either about pure mana or augmentation magic. However, she wasn't having as good a time as Alyssa, and especially not as good as Asher. I need to choose carefully, Amelia told herself as she meticulously tried to understand each of these books. The professor mentioned a few names. Let's look for them, Amelia murmured as she started flipping through the pages before setting the book aside. All of them had received a few suggestions from Elsa, but she didn't mention the fact that they could only visit a particular section. There were two reasons the elders didn't outright protest the students from World Academy entering the Sanctuary of Mages. contemporary romance. The first reason was that they would only read the books related to their strongest affinity. This meant that a plethora of information and legacies passed down by generations of elders in the Mage Association would remain safe. The second reason, which simplified the whole process immensely, was thus, the chairman of the Mage Association had the right to grant direct disciples, and two of their family members, access to the sanctuary once each. After that, they needed to earn that right by contributing to the Mage Association. Farnes used his favors with Silvers to arrange a visit to the sanctuary of mages, as Silvers had no official disciples he taught. Silvers's position in the Mage Association was distinct from previous chairmen. There was a reason he was given the title of Archmage, among many others. Furthermore, while Silvers was considered one of the most powerful mages in the history of mankind, this claim was never officially confirmed by anyone. Even Silvers himself never claimed to be the best mage ever born, though many believed otherwise. Amelia's eyes sharpened, her determination clear. She was intent on maximizing this opportunity. A year ago, she was regarded as the best in the Greville family, but suddenly Asher's overwhelming talent overshadowed hers. She didn't want to surpass Asher, recognizing the gap between them, but that didn't mean her competitive spirit had waned. Moreover, she had a new motivation: to become a role model for Livia, who looked up to her. While Amelia was full of energy and eager to read the books, Alyssa approached the task with a quieter zeal, selecting a new book. This book detailed methods to augment the structural strength of ice. Ice was an advanced element. The room she was in housed works of numerous renowned mages from history. Some books even explored Tier 4 spells, which were currently beyond Alyssa's grasp. Alyssa's gaze, somewhat listless, scanned the words. She began to grasp various methods to implement a superior spell circle and strengthen the formation even more. The technique was intricate. The individual who discovered these spells also emphasized the considerable amount of mana required to execute them. She set the book down, not having finished it. She recalled Elsa's advice, which emphasized understanding the fundamentals of each book and identifying what one needed before selecting the 5 books to take. Completing even one of these books could take months, and fully comprehending their theories required even more time. Yet they had only a single day to choose the research papers or books they needed. However, among the 3 of them, there was one who wasn't strictly adhering to these guidelines. Magic mastery is increasing. Another system notification appeared as Asher voraciously consumed the content of the books, his mind exploring various adaptations using the knowledge he acquired. For Asher, the restricted section of the Great Library and the Sanctuary of Mages were the only places where he could obtain higher-tier space element spells. There were specific items Asher sought in the Sanctuary of Mages, with the space element being his primary focus. Therefore, possessing the Rune of Aeirdan allowed him to access this particular section of the Sanctuary of Mages. Because of the Greville bloodline, if Asher entered the Sanctuary of Mages in his previous life, he would have been teleported to the pure mana section the first time he entered this place. His bloodline made it possible for his body to attract mana, which was one of the traits of an augmenter. This would have resulted in the spell determining that Asher was more suited as an augmenter even if he was not. But luckily, he neither had the Greville bloodline, and the presence of Rune of Aeirdan made the spell bring him here. This is also flawed, Asher said as he dropped the book. He had read much of that book, and his brain processed all the information, but he could see the fundamental flaws in the spell. He could fix it, but the power would decrease substantially if he did. Grasping the spatial elements around was a challenging task that not many mages could do, even if they had an affinity for it. Even if they could master it, the constant mental drain and the effects of using space magic made it impossible for researchers to stay sane throughout their studies. Many of these books deviated from their intended path as the researchers got lost in their work and perished before completion. The only reason the Mage Association permitted such studies was because of the power of the element. It was clear that if they made any progress in this field, it would be beneficial for the entire world. The High Council also allowed people to learn space magic, but they made sure that everyone pursuing the path of a hunter understood the consequences of such decisions. Asher read a spell, raised his finger to mimic it, and a ball of violet energy formed at his fingertip. The spell was designed to gather spatial elements, but it was described as extremely difficult to implement. However, for Asher, this wasn't the case. The rune of Aedan enabled him to perform such tasks with much greater ease. Having witnessed the effects of the rune of Aedan firsthand, Asher was convinced that the swordsmanship Nathan had demonstrated to him paled in comparison to what he could achieve at his level. Because the power of the rune of Aedan increased with the rank of the mana core, this suggested that Nathan's rune of Aedan was of SSS rank. Outside the sanctuary, did you tell that girl about the books inside? Edward asked Elsa. No, but if she was teleported to the section of her advance element, she might find them, Elsa replied. Then it's fine, Edward said. Elsa understood Edward's inquiry and had no reason to inform Alyssa. In Elsa's opinion, it was better if Alyssa remained unaware. However, unbeknownst to them, Alyssa was already in the know. Inside the sanctuary, as Alyssa perused multiple names, her steps halted upon spotting a particular one. Elizabeth Garcia. This was the only location where records or documents bearing this name could be found. It was the sole remnant of her mother's existence in this world. Elizabeth Garcia had been one of the most accomplished mages in the advanced ice element, and she was Alyssa's mother. Alyssa's gaze fixed intently on the name, standing beside the only remaining testament to her mother's legacy. Due to the purge of the Garcia family, anything associated with them had been expunged, including their achievements and possessions. Sanctuary of Mages was a place that had remained untouched by the lore of the society, and even High Council didn't interfere with it. It was meant to be a place where the knowledge gathered, and it didn't matter what the person who wrote it. The status and power of the individual behind the research didn't matter. If their work was of merit, their name would be forever preserved in the Sanctuary of Mages. Drop. A single tear fell from Alyssa's seemingly dull eyes when she saw the name of her deceased mother. Once, she was a mage praised for her prowess and remarkable abilities. Now, however, her name only invoked hatred in people's hearts. Images of her departed mother flooded Alyssa's mind, while the screams from her nightmares echoed in her ears. The tear that landed on the book evaporated, protected by a spell, but it was the only tear Alyssa shed. I am not weak anymore, she muttered as she turned the page. I promise you, Mom, Alyssa said with her emotionless eyes. Despite her appearance, from the inside, her emotions were a wreck. She was having difficulty controlling herself, but she knew she had to do it. She knew that if she crumbled here, it would be a waste of all the opportunities she had received until now. Outside the sanctuary, the elders who had just left were returning, but the expressions on their faces were far from pleasant. I can't believe they allowed a child like hers inside such a place, one of them said. It's such a disgrace that we've allowed all this to happen, he added. However, one of the elders with them didn't share the same sentiments as the others. Still, he went along with their views because letting Alyssa into the Sanctuary of Mages tarnished their reputation. The Mage Association primarily consisted of individuals from ordinary backgrounds who worked for and contributed to the association. All three associations were structured in such a way that regular citizens could climb the ranks if they possessed the necessary talent and capability. Allowing someone related to the Garcia family in was tantamount to inviting public animosity. The current state of affairs already had people raising questions about some of the elite families. Ads by Pub Future. Recently, even the World Association faced scrutiny until they abruptly altered the rules they'd established. Sigh, if only she wasn't her child, the elder lamented. While he felt sympathy for Alyssa, he also harbored resentment towards the Garcia family. He understood why the other elders strongly opposed letting someone like Alyssa in. Their animosity wasn't aimed at Alyssa, but her mother, Elizabeth Garcia. She had been offered a position as an elder in the Mage Association but had turned it down due to her marriage. Had she accepted, she would have become the youngest elder in the association's history. There were whispers suggesting she might have been a strong contender to succeed Silvers in the distant future. Her academic achievements earned her disdain from some elders who believed much of Elizabeth's success stemmed from her influential background. Even though she didn't possess a monstrous talent like Eva Greville, Elizabeth was exceptional in magic research. Having her work housed in the Sanctuary of Mages stood as testament to her profound understanding of magic. Just like Alyssa, Elizabeth also possessed the Ice Advance element. Making a child suffer because of their own mistakes, the elder mused, shaking his head as he walked alongside the other elders. Meanwhile, Elsa stood near the gate, with Edward present as well. Edward knew that Elsa would remain there due to her duty, but he had many responsibilities demanding his attention elsewhere. Unfortunately, I must leave. However, if you have any queries, don't hesitate to contact me, Edward remarked. Elsa nodded in acknowledgement. As Edward departed, Elsa turned her gaze back to the gate. I wish things had gone differently for both you and her, Elsa whispered. From the moment Elsa laid eyes on Alyssa, she recognized her identity. Upon closer observation of Alyssa's condition, Elsa discerned that Alyssa's days were numbered. With damaged mana meridians and the use of gravity magic, Alyssa's fate seemed sealed, destined for an early demise. She would either succumb to physical deterioration or the mental strain associated with wielding the space element. A memory from the past resurfaced. I wonder what it's like to have a child. A radiant young woman in her early 20s with cherry blossom pink hair mused, gazing at her friend. Dummy, you are too young to be thinking about that, her friend replied, playfully flicking her on the forehead. Ouch! The young woman exclaimed, rubbing the spot. Elsa, you're so mean. She protested, eliciting a giggle from her friend. How will you handle all those grumpy old men in the Mage Association if you can't even handle this, Liz? Elsa asked with a teasing smile. I'll simply show them my talent. Who would dare bully the daughter of the Garcia family? Elizabeth retorted with a smug expression. And my brother already promised he'd deal with anyone who tries to bully me, Elizabeth added. As if you've ever asked for his help, Elsa said, shaking her head in amusement. Do you recall how often we could have avoided trouble if you'd just leveraged your status a bit? Elsa asked. Despite her proud references to her family, Elsa knew that Elizabeth seldom used her family's name to get out of sticky situations. Come on, it's not like I don't have my best friend to lean on, Elizabeth said, playfully grabbing Elsa's arm. Spare me the drama. I'd rather stay out of the messes you make for yourself, Elsa replied with a tired look on her face. Sigh. My best friend would abandon me, Elizabeth lamented playfully. Suddenly, they felt someone jump onto their backs and wrap their arms around their shoulders. However, this unexpected gesture didn't startle Elizabeth or Elsa in the slightest. Don't worry, if Elsa won't help you, I'll be there to rescue you, the girl chimed in, clinging to their backs, contemporary romance. Thank you, Philia, Elizabeth responded, placing her hand atop Philia's and offering a warm smile. Taking a deep breath, Elsa refocused. The past she was reminiscing about was of no consequence now. The present wasn't the bright future they had envisioned, but there was nothing she could do now. There was no way to save Alyssa. Elsa wasn't even sure if she wanted to, considering how Alyssa's life might have unfolded if she weren't in her current condition. It's better for you to find peace in your life, at least in what's left of it, Elsa murmured, shutting out her thoughts. Hours passed while Elsa waited for the trio, but within the Sanctuary of Mages, an unforeseen event was unfolding. You were saying you can enter that place. Asher inquired, glancing at Riffer, who gave a slight nod in confirmation. Asher's gaze drifted to a large white door, adorned with the insignia of the Mage Association and a slot for a specific badge. Judging by its shape, Asher surmised that this was one of the exclusive doors only Silvers could access within the Mage Association tower. For the past 2 months, Asher had dedicated much of his time to hunting and providing Riffer with mana gems he purchased using his own GP. Riffer reached his limit once his level hit 20. Not only did his size increase, but Asher also sensed a growth in Riffer's abilities. The system labeled these as innate skills, and indicated that upon reaching level 20, Riffer possessed certain unique skills. It elaborated that some of Riffer's abilities stemmed from his innate instincts and could only be developed further over time. What Asher didn't knew was that Riffer wasn't gaining new abilities but was instead recalling them, consuming the beasts and mana gems to regain his original power. The reason for Riffer's self-imposed limitations remained a mystery, known only to the strange beast. However, due to sealed memories, the massive beast, which could strike fear into even the most powerful beings, had transformed into the smaller snake beast it now appeared as. Try, but don't break anything, Asher instructed, watching the black energy appear from the tattoo on his hand and move toward the door. Riffer moved towards the door as black energy began covering it. His blood-red iris shone, and the energy slowly started to pass through the door. This wasn't a regular door that could be passed through so easily. Each door led to a different location, utilizing a unique spatial spell and runes that enabled it. Yet, Riffer's energy managed to penetrate that spell without getting entangled with the spatial energy. Riffer's form disintegrated as he moved to the other side, leaving Asher alone in the room. Asher approached the door and saw similar black energy forming a cloud-like figure in front of it. When Asher touched the cloud, the black energy immediately wrapped around and enveloped him. He didn't feel it, but he vanished from that room and reappeared inside another. The skill Riffer had just used was closely related to the skill known as shadow travel. Given the link Riffer shared with Asher, with close contact, Riffer could summon Asher to him. Too tired, Riffer murmured, his blood-red iris fixing on Asher before disappearing into Asher's right arm. Asher observed the fading black tattoo on his arm, but quickly turned his attention to the room. Instead of being in a typical room, he was in a space where only a few books were stored. Ads by Pub Future. He stepped forward, scanning the area and noticing some books in poor condition. So, it's also about the space element. Asher wondered aloud, noting the limited number of books. This meant that this particular door was a location only Silvers could access. He wondered why Silvers had books about the space element when he knew Silvers Grandis had never delved into it. Yet the books before him suggested Silvers had indeed explored the space element. Or, maybe he didn't, Asher mused aloud, answering his own query. He was skeptical, but picked up a book. As he'd anticipated, there was no author's name, and it didn't seem particularly ancient. It appeared to be 60 to 80 years old, give or take. Flipping a page, Asher wasn't greeted by standard theories, but by accounts of various feats of space magic. The initial pages made it sound like a diary of a mage consumed by space magic. However, if this book were trivial, there would be no reason for Silvers to protect it so meticulously. Even the chairman of the Mage Association couldn't prevent others from reading books not authored by them, unless bound by the mana oath. Only under specific circumstances, like when a text was deemed too dangerous for public knowledge, could they intervene. The criteria for what constituted dangerous were explicitly outlined in the founding rules of the Mage Association. Only if the chairman genuinely believed that a work posed a significant threat could they restrict access. Asher's skepticism stemmed from the idea that ordinary research couldn't possibly threaten an SSS rank mage. As he continued reading, he realized the research must belong to a mage of at least SS rank. However, There were no known records of a space element mage attaining above an S rank. It was known thing that only a few mages that had the affinity for space element lived long enough to reach S rank in their late 20s, and all of them died in their early 30s. Even in his previous life, where Asher amassed knowledge of various sectors, there was no record of such a mage that could use space element, and was above S rank. The reason why Asher already concluded that the author of this book had to be a SS rank hunter was because of the way that mana and its form was mentioned along the crazy lines that were written on this book. Asher himself had reached the realm where he could sense mana much better than anyone else. Even with his body half dead due to his doping technique, Asher could still recall the sensation of mana that was engraved in his mind. It wasn't something that could be taught. One needed to reach that place and see it for themselves to understand what was being described in this book. But nothing too shocking was present in this first few pages of this book. But it changed after Asher reached the next few pages. As Asher read through, he felt for the first time that a correct representation of space was present in the spell, but it was also a bit off but not too much. Due to the rune of Aedan, Asher's perception of space was much different from other mages, and it was because of that very reason that Asher and Nathan could use space element, without having to suffer through the consequences that came with it. Asher could feel the space around him naturally, which was something he couldn't do in his previous life. But before reading it through, Asher remembered something. There were only 17 hours left from the time they would immediately be teleported back to the entrance of the gate, as the badge that was used to open the sanctuary for them also mentioned the time they would stay behind. And taking this book out was not an option. Due to the fact that Silvus had hid this book instead of leaving in the sanctuary of mages, meant that if it left this room there would be a spell that would detect such thing. So the only way for Asher to deal with the situation was to store every single text in the book in his head, contemporary romance. It wasn't too hard for Asher, but that he needed to only cram the book's knowledge without actually learning it. And the time was ticking, and the way this book was written was absurd. A normal person wouldn't have even found that something was being taught through this book, but Asher could see it because of the way he sensed the space through rune of Aedan, was a bit similar to the way it was depicted in this book. One by one, Asher started reading through the texts that sometimes explained something, but later on became worthless texts. Instead of learning through this book, Asher was only focusing on remembering all this text because it was the only way he could have the information inside this book even when he left the sanctuary. There were a total of 12 such books, and Asher only had 17 hours in total to retain every single thing in his mind. But he knew it was worth his time to do this instead of the books outside that were also quite valuable. But even while reading through it, Asher felt that all the information was a complete mess. Even if he wasn't trying to understand it, it felt as if this information incomplete. With the way this book was written, there a chance that the other 12 books might have the answers to the things that were absent in this book. This is strange, Asher said, having already gone through 4 books. 3 hours had passed, and after reading the first book, Asher had assumed the subsequent books would fill in the missing parts, but that wasn't the case. Even though Asher found the depiction of the space element much more precise and intriguing, there was nothing else written in there. This felt less like a book and more like a journal with no clear purpose. Hours passed as Asher flipped through the pages, immersed in absorbing all the knowledge before him. In the vast, empty room, where only 12 books lay, Asher was certain there had to be a reason these books' existence was so restricted. But the more Asher read, the stranger the situation became. It was nearing the end, with only 1 hour left, when Asher set down the last book, which was noticeably thinner than the rest. There's nothing in it, Asher remarked, his indifferent eyes surveying the book. Even though he had fully understood its contents, from what he remembered of the outline, he reached this conclusion. However, one thing stood out after reading all 12 books. Despite perusing them in a peculiar sequence, He noticed the erratic writing and nonsensical words were more pronounced in some books than in others. All the sentences extolled the greatness and depth of the space element. This was a typical trait among those who delved into and wielded space magic. Often, these individuals would get lost in their own thoughts while researching, which is why they were closely monitored. If someone wished to study the space element, they had the options of joining the Mage Association or the World Academy. Before the World Academy was established, the Mage Association was the sole haven for space mages, and they were monitored accordingly. 37 years are mentioned throughout these books, Asher noted as he returned the books to their original spots. From his calculations, the author of these books was around 50 years old, but that didn't make sense. And that's because Asher himself knew what the effects of mental drain felt like. In his previous life, he had spent years, even during his time at the World Academy, trying to find a remedy for his own growing madness. But there was no cure. He only found his peace around Alyssa, but there was no solution to his madness. Similarly, there was no cure for the effects of using the space element, at least not in the past. However, there was evidence of such a person's existence, if Asher's assumptions were correct. Things didn't make sense until Asher arrived at a conclusion that seemed utterly absurd. He found it peculiar that the implementation of space magic was the only aspect portrayed inaccurately in these books. The sensation of space and its usage were vividly described, but the actual implementation was flawed. A perfect spell didn't exist, and even today, mages seek ways to streamline the spell structure or modify it for enhancement. From Asher's perspective, it wasn't odd that the implementation might have been off. Even in his previous life, when he didn't have the system to enhance his abilities, Asher could assimilate knowledge instantaneously. Back then, Asher would have come to the same conclusion, although it would have taken him considerably longer. Currently, various theories were forming in Asher's mind. A person who could provide such lucid depictions of space, exhibiting all the symptoms and side effects, yet falter in its actual implementation raised questions for Asher. And Asher reached some conclusions. Either, Silvus wanted to erase the identity of this person. So their work was hidden like this, despite having no clear depiction of any magic that was powerful enough for Silvus to do such a thing. Second conclusion was about the person itself. Maybe they didn't have space affinity. Asher spoke as he placed the last book on its place. If somebody would have heard Asher's statement, they would have called him stupid, but Asher had his own reasoning for reaching such an absurd conclusion. But at the end of the day, it was only the assumptions that Asher had, I think you should take a look at. Due to the fact that Asher never heard about such a thing, in his previous life despite the amount of information he had amassed made him think that finding anything about this was not possible right now. There were far more things that needed to be done, and with the end-year tournament approaching, Asher knew that things would get busy. He had just received the news that the black market was finally moving the mana crystals, and Kai and Dane had begun their next mission. While all the attention was on Zephyr, the amount of eyes that were placed on World Academy had decreased and the end-year tournament would bring that attention back. And it was finally time when the twins would enter the World Academy as well. And with the twins gone, both Arthur and Sylvie would be freed from maintaining the security of the twins. Right now, Asher had operated his tech however he wanted, and Sylvie didn't look too much into it. But he knew when the name Aztec was announced, Sylvie was the first one to look over the trade history of Aztec. But she stopped after a while, not going too far and allowing Asher that freedom. And that happened partially due to the twins, and amount people that were coming after the Greville family after the Kalwas Gala. Twins were not the entire reason why such people were gathering around Soren. Nathan taking the SSS rank mana gem was also the reason why such people were being sent. And Asher wanted to finish everything related to Aztec within that time frame, and thus black market trade was a must. Sensing Asher's current thoughts, Riffer came out and went towards the door again to create a gateway for Asher to pass through from. It was almost time when their visit would end. There were still 5 books that Asher needed to choose, and there multiple of them for him choose from. Contemporary romance. But the 5 books Asher chose were all about spells and structure of space movement spells. After an hour passed, Elsa, who was waiting at the entrance, saw the door shine, and one by one she saw them coming out with 5 books in their hand. Amelia looked around as she Alyssa, who was hovering and holding books that were quite big, but so were hers. After spending so much time, Amelia found something that could help in the long term as well as short term. The end-year tournament was near, and Amelia wanted to make choice wisely. Asher was the last one to come out, with books that were not big as Amelia or Alyssa's, and Elsa looked around at the cover of their books, especially Alyssa. The moment her eyes fell on the topic ice magic, she had a thought that Alyssa might have chosen Elizabeth's work, but after looking at the names, she relaxed seeing it was not present. Whether Alyssa didn't find or chose not to bring out those books, it didn't matter to Elsa. She was just glad that no issue would raised if the books chosen by Alyssa were not the ones that were associated with Elizabeth Garcia. Frost magic. Elsa glanced as she looked at one of the books. Frost magic was an extremely complex and hard magic to learn, as it required precise mana control and understanding of both ice and water element. Looking around, Elsa frowned as she looked at Asher's books. This was the outcome she didn't wanted either. She was hoping that Asher would have been teleported to the black element section, but seeing the result she wasn't glad. I should talk to him later, Elsa made remark in her head to talk Asher to stop delving into space magic. His future was bright, but Elsa wasn't pleased with the way Asher did things from the day he joined the World Academy. It seems you have completed your trip from Sanctuary of Mages. Edward entered with a smile on his face. I hope you chose wisely, because I have seen many people mess up on their first visit, Edward said. Edward turned towards Elsa, as one thing he wanted to mention right now. I forgot to tell you, but the chairman has returned and he has invited all of you there for a couple of minutes, Edward said as Elsa raised her eyebrows. It was rare for Silvus to invite someone personally given his personality, and even Elsa herself have only met Silvus on rare occasions. Asher maintained his calm face, but he also wanted to see Silvus himself. He had only heard about the fact that all the SSS rank hunters were injured, but he wanted to see what the extent of those injuries were. Due to the status of Silvus, even Elsa couldn't ignore such a request, so she accepted it easily. It wouldn't take too long, and you might be able to ask him a few questions, Edward said to make everyone comfortable. Is it fine for her? Elsa asked, walking beside Edward as he guided them to the highest floor of the Mage Association. Edward replied, there were no extra instructions, so I think it's fine. They were a short distance from Asher, Amelia, and Alyssa, allowing them to converse comfortably. Elsa wasn't sure why Silvus wanted to meet them. However, given the relationship between Silvus and Fanas, she felt confident the meeting would proceed smoothly. Even Edward wasn't certain about Silvus's reasons for the call, but he guessed it might involve Asher and Amelia. After all, the previous event at Kalwa's Gala had been a disaster, leading to its cancellation. Given the widespread rumors of Asher's talents, it wasn't surprising that Silvus wanted to see the young prodigy for himself. Asher glanced around as he entered the elevator. It ascended, and they soon reached the Mage Association Tower's pinnacle. Upon entering, they felt a surge of mana. This sensation was a characteristic feature of the top floor, maintained by numerous mana crystals supporting a runic formation that concentrated the mana. You can meet him in that room, Edward said, pointing to a door some distance away. Elsa led the way, and the others followed. Inside, they encountered an elderly man with amber eyes and silver hair. Upon seeing Elsa, Silvus received a slight bow as a sign of respect. Amelia and Asher did not bow, and Alyssa remained still. You've grown much stronger since your time here as a mage, Silvus remarked, looking at Elsa. Thank you, she responded, taking a seat. Asher and Amelia did the same, while Alyssa stayed in her wheelchair. I assume Edward informed you of the purpose behind this visit, said Silvers. As you're aware, given the sanctuary's significance to the Mage Association, your time here is limited, he explained. This was something I discussed with your principal, and he agreed to it. Silvers noticed the girl on the wheelchair, and he already knew her identity as he had received the list of the students that were going to visit here beforehand. But the reason he was present here was not Alyssa Astaria, but it was Asher. And by seeing with his own eyes, even Silvers was surprised to see a first year at World Academy being C-rank hunter. But I had a question, and it is specifically for you. Silvers looked at Asher. You are a swordsman, so why are you spending your time learning magic? Silvers asked. He was genuinely curious behind the reason why the grandson of the sword god, who was extremely skilled at swordsmanship, was learning magic. Because I want to, Asher replied with a calm face. It was a straightforward answer. He didn't needed to explain anything to Silvers, and he was sure that Silvers would never be able to know about how his new bloodline granted him the ability to use both mana and aura. Silvers didn't say much, but he looked directly at Asher's eyes. Being in the presence of such a powerful person, anyone including powerful S-rank hunter would have felt the pressure, but Asher's eyes remained the same. I have heard he is calm, but I didn't expect this, Silvers thought in his head. Due to his mana sensitivity, he could sense when people would become nervous in his presence due to the mana movement inside. Interesting, Silvers thought. Well, everyone has the right to choose their own path, Silvers said. But, I would advise you to not chase after something that is not achievable, Silvers said. His words made Asher feel irritated for some reason. And he felt that his madness was close to break out, and it wasn't getting difficult for him to control it. Such a reaction didn't happen to Asher since the moment he had returned to the past, but it was happening right now. Asher glanced at Alyssa for a moment and, confirming that she was present there, he felt his madness calm down. Is this the effect? Asher thought in his mind about the certain thing that the system had told him in this past month. And it was about the increase of his strength that making him closer to his madness. But this reaction didn't happen due to Silvers's words or the reason that the system had warned Asher about. On the flying island where the World Academy was present, inside the depth of the temple-like building, a being opened his eyes. Is it reverting back? The being questioned. The changes was felt by the being. But it seems like it's still not the time we will meet, the being muttered. His words made the space around his shake, and power above his existed within that small space. Confirming the changes, the being closed his eyes, as the time hadn't come yet. But before disappearing, the being opened his mouth. I shall go with your plans for now. Leaving these words behind, the being disappeared. At the Mage Association, Silvers talked with Asher a bit more, asking him questions about magic, in particular, contemporary romance. So, tell me the fault in the spell. Silvers created magic circle that floated before him. He wanted to see if the young man before him was truly serious about magic or not. Asher, who had regained his composure in just a few seconds, was behaving as usual now. Looking at the spell, there were multiple answers in Asher's mind. But there was no need for him to prove his worth in front of Silvers. Change the first formation circle, it's too complex for a spell that doesn't need it, Asher replied. Correct. It seems that you really did study the fundamentals, Silvers replied with a smile on his face. Elsa was not surprised because she had seen Asher's answers before and they were always perfect. Even she herself tried to find some faults, but there were none that she could find. Silvers talked with Amelia as well, questioning a few things about her learnings from the Sanctuary of Mages, and when he tried to talk with Alyssa, all he got were one-word answers. Silvers in particular didn't hated or had negative opinions regarding Alyssa. But the same could not be said for the Garcia family. But most of his questions were to judge the characters of the students sitting before him. Elsa was questioned as well, but the questions she got were too complex. Because of his own background, Silvers find it easier to talk normally with people, unlike the elite families and the others in high council that always hid their intentions behind their words. Well, you can leave now, Silvers said after he talked with them for half an hour. Amelia had a tired look on her face, and Elsa could guess that it wasn't easy for her to answer all the questions that were asked by Silvers. I thought you spent most of your time training. Amelia asked Asher while they were going out. I do, Asher replied, maintaining his calm demeanor. Really? Amelia asked once again. So why is your theory is so perfect? Even I spend 5 hours each day studying mage theory, Amelia muttered.